Hey everybody, how's it
Hello.
going?
We're here again.
We're here again. Again, it's another day. It's another Sonic Boom Live. Eric, what do we do? What is Sonic Boom Live? For those of
So
the three people who keep watching us.
yeah, we're uh, Eric and Justin.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know which side of me, or up or down, or whatever Justin is. You're seeing us side by side, probably.
Eric's here.
Uh,
Yep, there you
am I
go.
pointing?
There you go.
Nice. Justin's over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the two of us are co-owners of a small game middleware company called Sonic Bloom. We've have decades of experience in the games industry at this point, and saw that people would talk about the news and give their opinion on what's going on with game development, technology updates and changes. But a lot of it was sort of from people outside the industry, or that don't really have an insight into what's going on or how things are worked. They're just sort of speculate on what it means. So we figured that we would try to fill a gap and provide industry perspective. Like, what does it actually entail in many cases for the business side of things for the games? Why do things happen the way they do? Um, and so we figured we'd give a perspective on that type of thing here. Sometimes we bring in friends that we and fellow game developers to interview to get their perspective and bring them. Um, but most frequently, we try to take a look at what some items of news that we think are noteworthy, impactful for the industry, break them down, and see if we can glean any interesting information out of what's happening in the state of the game industry. To that end, Justin, what do we have today?
We have a couple of interesting articles that are cut down to the mechanics of the actual industry and the I think I mentioned it's like
Mega.
it's kind of it's this ongoing narrative about the industry and consolidation that we've been seeing lately. It's especially in the past couple of years. We've been seeing like an awful lot of game company consolidation. So this week we kind of talk about that further. The first one is in the periphery of this. Microsoft is basically making a counterpoint to Sony's point that we covered last week concerning the purchase of Activision in the Call of Duty franchise. If you look at our last week's episode, we talk about how Sony kind of addressed the regulators of who are overseeing the purchase, talking about how Call of Duty and the purchase of Call of Duty and having it exclusive to one's console is anti-competitive, anti-consumer behavior, and it'll be problematic fundamentally. And they made I'd say, a fairly good argument, the most compelling argument I've seen that counters the Activision purchase. But we saw the follow-up from Microsoft this week, which basically countered the argument. They made basically an accusation towards Sony saying, well, actually, you also engage in anti-competitive behaviors as well, anti-consumer behaviors. So we'll go over that. It's a little interesting. It just gives you some insight into how these companies sort of battle out their legal woes with each other. It's just being publicly seen right now because of such a high-profile purchase from Microsoft. So we'll cover that. Second item we have is Tencent is looking to become the largest shareholder in Ubisoft, which means that they get a controlling share. That has a lot of implications. Tencent's kind of a massive company. They've been making purchases left and right.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they are probably the most competitive large tech company along the lines of like Alibaba, but like Chinese Microsoft, basically. Tencent is actually in the article that I read to sort of inform myself on this, actually makes the argument that they're more diversified than Microsoft and therefore more likely to grow, more stable. But we'll go over Tencent and their laundry list of purchases and what a purchase of Ubisoft might mean, at least their controlling shares. And then finally, this is another point that we covered, I think last week. I want to say it was last week. But Unity had looked to purchase this company called IronSource, which would help them make become a more useful publishing platform. It would give them analytics to help better market and place ads in games, as well as becoming a more robust publishing platform. But IronSource's competitor, AppLovin, decided to follow up and try to make a counter offer at Unity to sort of prevent competition from growing. So we'll look at all three of those things. It should be interesting if anybody likes like the business mechanics of the game industry. To that end, we also should note that next week we're unlikely to be doing a show. So if you've found that we're so entertaining that you just can't miss a week of us, well, we're forcing this on you, and you cannot see us next week. The other thing is that our main jobs, selling and publishing a tool on the Unity Asset Store, it's up for sale this week. So if you want to get that, if you'd like to get Koreographer Pro, it's 40% off. Also, some of the other plugins that we support, like Hutong Games Playmaker is also on 40% sale, so there's a bunch of good deals to be had there. Unity is not doing a great job at making those what is on sale obvious, so you kind of have to dig for it in their site. But yeah, we're on sale. A bunch of other great apps are on sale and plugins. So if you're a developer, you like Unity stuff, you buy stuff from the Unity Asset Store. Well, there's a like multi-week sale going on where you can get 40% off of some of the top assets. So go check that out. All right, so let's just get into it. Eric, do you want to tackle the first one?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. We've got the Microsoft accuses Sony of blocking games from Game Pass. So basically, this is sort of a follow-on to some of the conversation we had last week. One of the things that we discussed was one of the topics we discussed was that Sony had in Brazil. Okay, let me back up. Let me back up. Microsoft indicated that they wanted to buy Activision Blizzard.
January.
And what's that? Yeah, in January.
Yeah.
And they offered something like around $75 billion for the 69 to 75 billion, depending on how you look at it, of money to do that, which was a premium over stuff. The timing was interesting because of various reasons. We covered that in the past. Sony, as part of the process of being a multinational company and getting through getting over regulatory hurdles to enable a transaction of this scale, there's something like some number of countries and regulatory bodies must have a pass through a validation step, something where people are given the ability to say, I object to this purchase for these potentially monopolistic reasons or these other reasons that are would break local laws in this jurisdiction, in this country, the state, whatever. And last week, as part of that, in Brazil, Sony filed papers that basically said that Microsoft owning Activision Blizzard would give them full control over the Call of Duty IP, the Call of Duty property, in all games, and that they foresaw a future where Microsoft would only allow Call of Duty on Microsoft's platforms, whether that be Xbox, Windows, or Game Pass, and that would lock out other platforms like Sony and the PlayStation platform from accessing those games. And as Sony argued, basically Call of Duty is genre defining. It is synonymous with first-person shooter in the games industry, and therefore there's this big thing. Microsoft effectively filed a response set of papers, and in that there were several interesting things, one of which was that they accused Sony of blocking games from showing up on Game Pass. And this is in contracts, right? So Sony is working with a contract with some smaller studio that says, hey, we'll help publish your game. We want to get it on the PlayStation. We want day one access. We want the first platform it comes out on to be a PlayStation platform. We're going to give you extra money for that to happen. And then as a byline in the contract somewhere, they say this cannot show up on competing streaming platforms or whatever. And that would include Game Pass. They may even specifically say you cannot, if you sign this contract and take this money, you are not allowed to enter into an agreement with Microsoft for Game Pass and the Game Pass platform. There are many reasons why they would actually do that, and there are possibly examples of games that are already out, like Resident Evil Village, where that did happen via some mechanism. But that's sort of Microsoft saying, like, throwing noise back and saying, hey, you're stopping people from putting games on our platform. Like, what are we supposed to do? We're going to buy up the companies and get it on the platform, because then you can't say anything and stop it from happening, right? So this is sort of a way for them to say, this is our way to compete with your already anti-competitive practices or whatever. Justin, do you have anything to add, or does that?
No, I think. Let's see. That sort of sums it up. I would just, I've seen it talked about quite a bit on other,
channels.
Talking head programs where people talk about the video game industry, and they consider this some sort of damning response.
Yeah.
But I think functionally it's not surprising, for one.
No.
I think Sony, particularly Sony and Microsoft, have been engaging this sort of behavior for a while now. Exclusive advertising rights, exclusive, periods of exclusivity where they can, this is not that strange. It's just that this is the first time that we're actually seeing like a functional game streaming platform come out. Sony had never really taken it serious during the PS3 era or the PS4 era, and Microsoft neither. It wasn't until Xbox Series X's release that they showed off that, hey, Game Pass can actually do streaming and do it quite well. So them making a claim like this is unfounded is, I don't know. They've engaged in just as shady behavior now. There's just platforms in which there's another vector in which games can be published, and they're now adding it to the clauses that in contracts they have with the publishers that Sony's giving money to someone like Capcom to say Resident Evil is going to be exclusively advertised on the PlayStation. It can be made available on both Xbox and Xbox and PlayStation. But I guess it appears that the clause was added that they can't publish onto Game Pass as well, which is anti-consumer behavior, which I would agree is anti-consumer behavior. It's just not shocking anti-consumer behavior from a set of companies that have engaged in consistent anti-consumer behavior. Like, no one wants, like the Call of Duty expansion to be released exclusively on the PlayStation. So if you're an Xbox player, you're like, oh, I want to play zombies. I can't. That's anti-consumer behavior, and the same thing happens on both sides. So,
to be fair, like, there's another tier to look at this at. Real quick, I want to just mention this, and that is that it's it's sort of anti-competitive for the consumer, the end consumer, because they, the platform is effectively getting some sort of exclusivity out of this. They can ensure that the only income is coming in through this one platform, which adjusts how you have to think about prices and whatever. However, for the game studio that's doing the actual development, this represents an amazing spot for competition. This is me as the developer saying, I have this product that I want to sell, and I have multiple people that are willing to throw different levels of money at me. So Sony can come to me and say, hey, we want your game exclusive for 6 months. We'll give you, $3 million for marketing expenses and whatever. And then Microsoft can come in and say, hey, we'll give you $3.5 million, and we only want 4 months of exclusivity.
Right.
Like, that is a competitions aspect that we should not skip over, because it's incredibly important for the health of the studio that's doing the development, for the marketability of the platform, because a lot of the marketing we see in games happens through these deals where the platform holders are paying and leveraging some at least part of the marketing budget that is frequently considered as being handled by a publisher.
Right.
So they get extra value out of that. And a lot of the times that's why people will enter into these exclusivity agreements, even if the developers initially were like, no, we're day and date. We want to be on all major platforms, make this huge splash. And then it comes down to the time and they're like, we have no money left for marketing. Crap. And then someone says, you made an awesome game with all that money that you used and didn't have any for marketing. What if we help you market it, but we, get the rights to the game on our platform for a bit?
Right.
Like it works out. It's a deal that helps make the games get made, helps get the games out into the market. And at least with the timed exclusivity thing, doesn't guarantee, like once that time limit is up, prices are set to be adjustable and all that other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if I have more to add to that. I think it's just.
I think the one thing I would say is like, reading a little bit more into this, Microsoft filed like a 28-page document or something like that as a response to Sony, and someone threw it into Google Translate because it was Portuguese, it was Brazilian Portuguese, and a non-Brazilian Portuguese speaker threw it into Google Translate, and apparently the language that came out was super snarky. It was like, well, do you even know how to make money, Sony? Sort of a thing. I don't know. That's just a comment. The one other thing I would say, like, one of the main sources for us, researching this prior to the show, was the Verge article, and in that article they have this quote that I want to read because I find it to be. I thought this was very interesting. Sort of Microsoft's response to Sony saying, "Hey, if you get full rights to this and put it on Game Pass, then that ruins. You basically are removing competition from the market for that." Microsoft's response basically is the paragraph reads. I'm sorry. The sentences read: Microsoft says a strategy of not distributing. Nope, that's not the right one. Where is it? Here we go. Yeah. Okay. Microsoft also claims that adding Activision Blizzard content to Xbox Game Pass will actually increase competition somehow. Quote, the inclusion of Activision Blizzard content in Game Pass does not impair the ability of other players, and by that they mean other game distribution platforms, to compete in the digital game distribution market, end quote, claims Microsoft in one document, where the company also argues it increases the competition thanks to, quote, high quality content at lower immediate costs, end quote. And this struck me as being Microsoft trying to be really, really weird with their anti-competitive language, and their kind of framing of the problem of monopoly or anti-competitiveness, where basically they're saying, look, we're going to put it, if we put up a game on Game Pass, it's going to be $9.99. That's the price for Game Pass, and that's a lower price. People right now pay $60 to $70 to get access to that game, and that's how they play it. But we're going to charge; they'll get access to it for $10. That's really high quality content at a really low price, and that's sort of their argument about like, well, it's not anti-competitive because the end consumer gets more money. But that's arguing it in reverse, which is really weird because the idea is, if there is actual competition in the market for a single game or for a single product or class of product, that competition will drive down the costs. But what they're saying is, because we're offering it at such a low price, there has to therefore be competition in the market.
Yeah.
Even though they're the only ones with that game, like, it doesn't make any sense at all. They're like, we're offering this really high value thing at a low price. There's a lot of extrapolation you have to go through to have that make any sort of realistic sense. And a lot of supposition. If you give them the massive benefit of the doubt and say, these other titles that people call out, Resistance, Battlefield, PUBG, like a bunch of these other games that they themselves actually bring up. If you believe that somehow they would gain the marketing and the name and the recognition that Call of Duty currently has, and they could build that up and somehow then become competitive, then that would affect but it still fails because Microsoft has a fixed price for their Game Pass thing. It gets really weird. It's very weird.
I think there's 3 points with bring up as well. I think we had discussed this earlier, but I think the reason why we get this sort of rebuttal from Microsoft is because they have to. I think it's
Yes.
Sony framed an argument that was actually pretty compelling, given the strength of Call of Duty and how giving the Microsoft the choice to make it available either exclusively on their platform or wider is too much power behind a single brand, and that's problematic. I think they made a fairly compelling argument, one of the best arguments against the Activision purchase I've seen, and so they have to follow up with this. The other thing with Microsoft's argument is I think the only way Game Pass is functioning right now is because Windows and the other businesses of Microsoft are subsidizing the failure of Game Pass. It's not that Game Pass is a failure because it's not attracting users, which it's clearly doing. It's a failure because the amount of money that's going to it is not profitable for them now, and they would not be able to do this if they couldn't write off the losses against other parts of their business. Like what they're doing, Sony cannot do, Nintendo cannot do. They're too large of a company, and they're taking their massive power and wealth to basically jumpstart a brand new business and not grow it naturally, grow it by acquiring the largest companies in the industry to make it a powerful platform, which just wouldn't fly. So the cost of Game Pass right now does not mean Game Pass can stay at this price, for one. And if they're the only competitor in the market because they're the only company that's sort of basically sequestered all the best games under their Game Pass platform, then the price can certainly be raised, and there's nothing you can do about it, because if you want to play Activision's game or Blizzard's games or what's it called, Bethesda's games, or Microsoft's games for that matter, you would have to be on that platform, because they can make it exclusive just to streaming. They can make it so there's no physical release of it or digital release of it. It also ignores the fact that it's like, if Game Pass sort of takes over games like Netflix has taken over movies, then the distribution of things like movies, or at least DVDs, becomes like, or the say comparing it to movies, DVD sales is not worth it to most publishers at this point. Physical sale of movies just doesn't make any sense. The residual money that they make off of a large production is done on the money that they make from Netflix or from any other streaming platforms and what they get out of it. So if you're looking at games and say, look, now Game Pass is the only thing that people play games on now that we've sort of fully transitioned to it 10 years down the line, how does this affect game developers when they can't charge $60 and see like the initial boost, and now they start seeing like a long tail of players playing their game via streaming service, in which they get, whatever it is, 10 cents per minute of game played. So we're talking about a platform that has the ability to, like, I don't know, completely change the economics of game development, and that could be very bad for consumers or could work out well, but it's just unclear what it will do exactly. So a lot of Microsoft's arguments in this space ring a bit hollow, because I don't think we quite understand the implications of what a Game Pass only future, or Game Pass as the major platform, will do to gaming in the long run.
Yeah, it's tough to say, even from a developer standpoint. I mean, as far as I have not yet heard what the financial model is for how developers are paid out. I think the last I heard, my recollection for what happens when your game is put on Game Pass, is that there is a very bespoke deal. Microsoft works out a deal directly with you. It's not like they would go to the music industry with, Apple Music or whomever and say it's 5% of a penny for every play. and then you make your money by having hundreds of thousands of plays and millions of plays across all the hours and days that people listen to music, right? It's weird with games because you can have a game that costs a ton of money, to hundreds of millions of dollars to make, and it takes you 10 hours to play through it, 20 hours to play through it. Or you can have a game that costs, I don't know, $100,000 to make, but people end up playing it for 300 hours. Yeah. And then if you go by time spent on the system, you get it incentivizes a certain type of game development, which is not necessarily good for the platform. So there has to be some other sort of model that's going on here, and I think that's something that Microsoft is trying to work out by having all of these bespoke deals, and that's also something they really don't have to worry about when they own the game development and the game itself.
Right. And I don't think we can get a good feeling for what the model is, given that they're willing to take loss right now to make the platform successful. But what does a successful platform mean to public or developers who are putting the game out on it when it is successful? Does it mean that they're going to be able to recoup their costs in a week, or is it, them taking months and months for them to recoup their costs and trying to maintain relevance of a single title? We don't know. And it's a little scary to see this much consolidation under one company without a business model that proves that this sort of consolidation is warranted. Or viable. You could see the outright death of Bethesda if Microsoft's gamble is not right.
Right. Yeah. If they're like, wow, we bet the farm and the farm bit it.
Yeah. And these companies are going down with us. That's a very real possibility. And I was going to mention, too, that, the last time we saw, a major shift in the way the game industry functioned, which was PS3 era, where the cost of games ballooned out. So it went from games costing, I don't know, $10-20 million to make to...
Yeah,
50 to
you're 100. You're talking about the, AAA mainline core
AAA mainline games.
Okay.
We saw the price balloon out. We saw middle developers die left and right, small studios disappeared.
Standard A-tier studios,
AAA survived, but in order for AAA to survive, they had to cut out GameStop because GameStop was eating away so badly at their sales that we saw the whole the movement away from single player games entirely. Not entirely, but it was a strong movement away from it, with really only Sony kind of holding it up, and maybe Nintendo saying no, we'll still make these. But it was not profitable to make a game that could be played and completed in 10, 15, 20 hours, because it would be bought for whatever full retail price, $60, then sold to GameStop, where GameStop would purchase it for $30, and then sell it again for $40, but none of that residual money would be making its way to the game publishers or the studios for that matter. So we saw this shift in development, which was we got to add multiplayer to give the game longer legs so that we'll see more initial purchases, and that initial purchase held on to longer so it doesn't get traded in. EA stopped making single player games. Microsoft, in a big way, did that as well. Ubisoft was looking at ways of doing that. And we saw this big shift, and it wasn't a good shift. We did not see better quality games come out of it. In fact, we saw a lot of really great story-driven games just fall off entirely because no one wanted to take a gamble on it.
Right. And that's sort of on the business side of things. What happens when the you suddenly are looking at as a developer, if you're trying to make a living on this, indie games, some indies just do make games because that's what they enjoy doing. That's what they do with their free time. Literally, they have a day job and then they make games at night, and they'll have to make some cool stuff. But for the industry, for people who are, and I emphasize that, I should say the for-profit industry, those who do this for a living, are looking at some point are looking at this and saying, how do I make the most money out of this product?
Yeah.
To hopefully fund the next one, and that calculus may change as a result of this type of platform.
Will change.
If all games go to this platform, well, it depends on how the platform holders pay out for it, right? That the way the money comes out of those platforms and is distributed to the games that show up on that list will affect the type of game that gets made and you end up playing. And we as in the game industry, we're all sort of nervous about this right now because no one wants to restrict the types of games that are being made.
Or see the death of like indie, right? Like,
right, yeah,
this could very well be the death of what we've enjoyed as an indie developer when like digital distribution was a boon for indie development. But if we get rid of digital distribution when you're paying for physical, like digital copies of it, and now every AAA studio game has to make its way onto Game Pass, and in opposed to paying, whatever, 50, 60, or like a couple $100s in a given month where there's a bunch of good releases, you're just paying $9.99 consistently. And where the majority of people are spending their time to say like on AAA games, and the indie games have to fight harder to become relevant, which means publishers have to come in for the indie studios and act as marketing spaces for those things, for those types of games. And then you see small indie titles just not finding a platform where they can distribute and sell their product. You could very well see the death of it. We could very well see the like reemergence of like AA and large like indie publishers, but the death of like all the small indie publishing. And we've seen this like in the app marketplace is a good example of this. Like Apple's app market used to be like a hotbed for a bunch of indie games and experiments in gameplay. And when people realized you could make a lot of money, it got flush with just everything. And it then meant your game on its own merits wouldn't necessarily mean that you'd get your money back. You had to pay a lot for marketing for you to get relevance in the App Store, and you're competing against like companies that just only deal in shovelware and have infinite amounts of marketing dollars to throw at burying your marketing. So it's like, this is not necessarily going to be the same thing, but like, this sort of change in the economics of games could very well kill parts of the game industry that we love.
Right. It could bring around certain changes that are positive as well. We just don't know. And at this point, I think there's fear, given what we see in the mechanics, is the possible outcomes. Right now, the anticipated outcomes, I should say, all seem to be somewhat more negative in a way in terms of restricting how stuff works. If you get rid of like players directly vote with their dollars, and you value like in a way that doesn't specifically value the total time played or spent with a game to its cost, which is because you can have those two things don't necessarily match up in terms of development effort,
right,
and development time, and that is the critical disconnect that would have to be reconnected for that model to make sense on a platform. Is that development time, the more time you play it, the more development time would have been required to get that to happen. If we have a parity in that and some ratio there, that makes it a relatively easy thing that we can do, and a relatively easy rule to create, where we're sort of giving people using just time spent with a game as a marker of the value that it provided to a player, and therefore the amount of money that was spent to make the game is being recouped at a rate that matches the amount of time that players are playing. It's this weird thing, but it's not how games work right now. That's not how development works at all.
Yeah. I mean, either way, I think we should expect monumental shifts. I don't think we're going to get away from that. And in the best case scenario, like, these things are profitable. There can be healthy competition there, and there are going to be, ample opportunity for platforms to exist in different ways, and different types of subscriptions to be entertained there, and indie platforms having a method to find prominence and not lose out on digital sales. But as of right now, Game Pass does not function as a business. It functions as a loss leader in Microsoft currently, and that's okay because they're willing to take that risk, but it does not prove that the model of it is functional yet. So we'll see how it works, and we'll see what actually comes of this case, like if they're actually going to be allowed to purchase Activision.
Yep.
Let's move on to the next story, because I think we've talked long about Activision and Sony and Microsoft and their weird love triangle going on.
Their spat lovers quarrel.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Next story is Tencent is looking to become the largest stockholder of Ubisoft. Basically, the story of this is besides covering what Tencent is, Ubisoft's, I think, controlling ownership is in the Guillemot family, which are the original founders of Ubisoft. I think they own 15-16% stock, and I think they have like a controlling share in the board of directors. So the Guillemot family has a lot of power over Ubisoft, and they were mentioning, I think earlier this week, that they were looking to work with investors to purchase a larger controlling share of the company to gain some of the power back and some of the control over Ubisoft to take it in directions that they want. Tencent seems to come out of the woodwork, as they do with a lot of these things, and make an offer to counter what the Guillemot family was looking to do. Basically, this means that Tencent was looking to go after the Guillemot family, who owns 15%, and offer them something they couldn't refuse, and I'll go over the details of that, to take their controlling share, which would give Tencent controlling shares of the company, would give them the power within the board of directors to veto decisions and to become one of the largest shareholders, well, the largest shareholder in Ubisoft, period. Now, the interesting thing about Tencent is whether or not you know them because of who they own, or because their name that keeps getting floated around, it should be known that Tencent is huge. They are very much a company that's similar to Amazon or Microsoft, in the sense that they offer server services, data services. There's like an entire technology back end. Never mind the fact that they've made successful purchases in game development companies. I think I was reading Game Developer, or I think it was from one of the business reviews, but they make mention that Tencent's actually in a better position than most large tech companies because their portfolio is more diversified and
it's massive,
more resilient against market shifts than, say, Microsoft or Amazon or any of the other large tech companies. So to go over who they own, they completely own Riot Games.
Do they now? They had they started out with like a 92.8%.
Yeah, and at that point it didn't matter. No, they're 100% controlling share. They're 100% owned by Tencent. Sumo Group is entirely owned by them as well. So that's Sumo Digital, and they do their own publishing, but they tend to be a support studio as well, where they'll do ports and versions of games for another company. A good example of this is Sackboy Adventure, and I think another game. I think under
that was the one for. Was that the one for PSP, or was it
Sackboy Adventure is PS5? Little Big Planet 3, I think, was also Sumo Digital. Mm-hmm. So they work with companies like Sony to create games that are not of their IP.
Right. Outsourced development.
Yes, but they also have developed their own things. But on top of that, they've also seemed to invest in a ton. Like, they have maybe 20, 30 different game companies that they own, anywhere from like a controlling share to a minority share in. But Supercell Games, who makes Clash of Clans, they have an 84% controlling share. Epic Games, they own a 40%. They're the largest single shareholder outside of, I think,
Tim Sweeney.
Yeah.
CEO.
Right, CEO of Epic, who makes Unreal Engine, Fortnite. Bloober Team, they have a 22% controlling share. They have sizable investments in Remedy, Paradox Software, Discord, Roblox, Clay. So, like, a bunch of studios that you probably play games from, and you would not know that Tencent actually has some sort of controlling share in them. either a majority share where they get to make the decisions for the company, or a minority share where they get to have some boardroom table chair at when they are making financial decisions. Tencent already owns a 5% share in Ubisoft, but they, I think, on the news of the Guillemot family looking to expand their power, this is when they stepped in. So that the mechanics of this deal are, they're eyeing the Guillemot family to make an offer to get the controlling share from, of which they're trying to get 15-16% from. They are looking to increase the share price to buy from them from 66 euro per share to 100 euro per share. So it's a huge raise over the going value of Ubisoft.
The 66 euro per share was the price they paid in 2018. So it is an increase over the shares. I'm not sure if it's shares of the company versus like stock market shares, which might be subtly different. If there's like different classes of shares.
There tends to be two share positions in these companies that are publicly traded, which is I'm blanking on the name. The general share pool. There's a name for that I'm blanking.
Yeah, and there's one that's like that comes with voting rights and other.
Yeah, so there's a voting class that usually comes from people like the CEOs and former owners or founders of the company. And this is what they're looking to grab from the Guillemot family, so that they would own controlling interest and they would be able to make decisions. It wouldn't be an outright purchase of Ubisoft. They're not looking to make that size of a purchase, but they're looking to say, like, Guillemot family, you can walk away from this, you can make a ton of money, and Tencent gets to be the daddy of Ubisoft. And with that
business
comes
daddy.
Business daddy. As John Oliver would say,
to
AT&T. Yeah, so that's the crux of that. What does it say about?
Real quick, I think if I'm reading this correctly, they're trading right now. Ubisoft Entertainment is trading right now at $9.43 US dollar on whatever market it is that they're on.
Yeah.
There's something in here that says, it's their market cap they give in euros, but yeah, and that might be in euros, and it says USD. It might actually be in euros. I don't know. Regardless,
in general, Ubisoft's been on a downward trend lately with their inability to produce games. Like, they have relied heavily on Assassin's Creed to carry the company, and the Assassin's Creed game franchise is losing steam. Much like we see with Call of Duty. It's not as performant as it was, say, in the past, 10 years. And they haven't really replaced it with anything. They've managed to can a Splinter Cell game, I want to say. It was Splinter Cell. There's a multiplayer game that they were supposed to release, and I think they just totally canned it. Which was, they showed gameplay of it and everything else. But they're like, yeah, it's done. They do not have... Well, they actually did announce an Assassin's Creed. They have the pirate game where you play a seafaring captain that uses mechanics from the Assassin's Creed, but it's a standalone game that they're putting a lot of their hopes into. There's a bunch of games that they're not seeing the success they need to become, or to maintain their relevance as like a major publisher.
Here I found one. It says UBFP. EN Paris. So in there, the Ubisoft Entertainment SA. That was the other one I mentioned was apparently the US market. Mm-hmm. In this market, I'm guessing since it's in euros that it's there, and there's Paris is written there, that it's the French market. Their current price appears to be at around 46.01 euros.
Okay.
Which is dramatically down before in 2018, 66 euros was roughly the price. That was about the price. It went up between 2018 and 2019. It looks like it went up to about 85 euros. It is currently now trading at 46. So if they're going to buy for 100 euros,
they're offering a giant raise over what
the current market rate is, and even more so than what their previous purchase was.
Which goes to show like what Tencent sees Ubisoft as. Like that's a
Yeah,
huge raise, but they must go
yeah,
like, look, the IP family that they have is strong enough.
yeah,
They're releasing a streaming platform with like Tencent's releasing a streaming platform, I think with Nvidia
yeah.
and someone
They have,
else.
they have this is separate, but they have a apparently they're working on a mobile device
Yes,
with Logitech.
that Logitech. That's who it was. I think there's actually a third company in there, but I don't remember who it is. I could be wrong on that. But yeah, they're looking at creating a streaming software. So it wouldn't surprise me, given the amount of investments they have in game companies, to say, hey, we're actually starting our own game streaming service as well. They certainly have the backend to support it. So,
Yeah,
they could be playing exactly like Microsoft. They're just like, well, we have all the technology to support something like this. Let's just do it. And like, you can't expect Microsoft to go in and say, we're going to be the only Netflix and no one's going to compete with us
right.
before someone goes, nope, you're not. And before you're allowed to do that, we're going to step in and do it too. So, I mean, Sony's already trying it to some degree, but it wouldn't surprise me that Tencent makes a bid against Microsoft to sort of be in that position.
I think it's important to mention that sort of the motivations behind Tencent doing this right now. Um, they are the company that started QQ, which is the main, the most popular, as far as I'm aware, messaging app and service in China.
They also own
Um,
WeChat as well, which is the same thing. I think they own both major platforms.
yeah, they also have this other social network that's China only, I believe.
That's WeChat. Oh,
Weibo.
there's Weibo. Yeah,
Yeah, there's something like that. There's I don't know the names, but they have a very popular set of things. That's where they grew out of. They started diversifying into the game space at some point from there, and advertising and a bunch of other stuff. So they've been building this like entertainment social system and conglomerate of businesses. Um, Last year, I think it was last year, either earlier this year or last year, China, regulatory bodies in China decided to put tighten up restrictions on gameplay in China. So they are dramatically reducing the amount of hours that a Chinese citizen is allowed to play games. Period. And they're reducing and severely limiting the types of games and the content of games that can be released in the market
I
there.
mean they're severely limiting their large companies at that. So like,
Yeah,
we saw this growth of the tech industry in China over the past 15, 20 years.
right.
In cases like Alibaba and Jack
Yeah,
Ma, Jack Ma was forced out of controlling position within the company.
right. And a lot of this, my understanding of this, when I read this is from months ago whenever it was first announced, I read into it a bit. Was that the reason for this was that the government in China, some body within the government, was concerned about the amount of time that the citizens were spending playing games and wasting time instead of doing things that would increase their own intelligence or contribute back to society in some way. So this was a way for them to basically put the locks down on entertainment and say, no, you can't play these things for all hours. I think they said something like 3 hours a week is what you get.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
something hilariously low. And to the point where like certain games just make zero sense to be, you can't play them. You can't be competitive with them because you there's no way you can spend enough time to get good enough. So Tencent, who was an entertainment company in China, now has to start saying, well, if we're going to survive as a company built on the fundamentals and the types of technology and the space we understand, they need to look outside of China for how to diversify and how to build themselves
And protect themselves against potentially destructive policies that are happening in China.
Right. And so they're right now. That's part of what's driving, we believe, part of what's driving this interest in picking up, another large publisher. Possibly they're looking at this and saying, Ubisoft is one of the last remaining
Large
large
publishers,
publishers
yeah.
that's independent.
That's affordable, right? At that,
Right.
like trying to take on, say, something like
Affordable.
Take-Two.
Yeah. Right.
It's like that. I don't think anybody's entertaining that idea because it's like
What
$100 billion company at this point. And if you wanted like realistically buy Rockstar,
Right. Yeah. I was about to ask what is the studio or studios that are
it's
that
really
take to
Rockstar that is
right.
like the backbone of everything. I mean, it's been that way for a while. Like what was it like?
Rockstar, who makes all the Grand Theft Auto games and Red Dead
Yeah,
Redemption. Bully, was that the name of that game that they made that
Bully.
one time?
Yeah, it's like a minor IP of theirs, but yeah, it's mostly Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, yeah.
That what has like over 100 million purchases.
Active players or something. Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's like
yeah.
purchases. It's like it has as many purchases as some consoles are able to sell. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Um.
Yeah.
Anyways, well, I guess we probably hit what we can on that. It's still
Sure.
speculative until it happens, but it's something that probably people should keep on their radar, especially
Yeah.
as it also, like I said, it contributes to this whole consolidation of the game industry, which is a little alarming because sort of like wide scale consolidation that you're seeing here usually does not mean good things for the consumer. For one, it means you have less choices. There's more control over the places that you tend to purchase from. And
Hmm.
if there is a destabilization in the industry for whatever reason, if one company falls, it tends to take a lot down with it. So, if, like we said earlier, if Microsoft's bid in for Game Pass doesn't pan out, like they're
Yeah.
dragging the companies that they just bought with down with them.
This this can also be just in, when a large corporation buys another one, they can screw up what they bought. That happens pretty frequently. And they can provide, attempt to provide services and support, but do so poorly or do so from a market that they're used to and try to apply it in markets that they're not used to, and it's a mismatch. That's not. I don't know that would happen in this case. I mean, clearly Ubisoft is a multinational corporation. Basically, any Assassin's Creed game you play, at the very beginning and at the very end, they say this game was built by thousands of developers from like 25 different countries or more. And they literally have offices all over the world to build these games, and they work together to build the games. It's crazy. But so I don't know. And Tencent has a history of, as looking at the list of games that or studios they've purchased, of not stepping in and screwing up what they've purchased. It seems they're relatively hands off.
Yeah, right now they treat it more as an investment opportunity
Right.
than like an
But it's
opportunity to control another company.
right. It's an investment vehicle
Yeah.
versus a strategic partnership or something that they want to squeeze more money out
Although
of. Or
I still
combine their
wouldn't
system.
rule out the idea of a strategic partnership, especially if
Eventually, yeah.
they decide to make a competitor to Game Pass.
Yep. Yeah. I would say the last thing I wanted to say on that was a case where things did not necessarily go terribly well was arguably, and this has been somewhat in the news recently, Square Enix's purchase of Crystal Dynamics and Ubisoft. It was not Ubisoft Montreal. It was
IDOS.
yeah, IDOS. Thank you.
Yep.
And to become Square Enix Montreal or whatever.
Yep.
Those companies were bought by Square, and a whole big part of it was like, great, they'll take the marketing and distribution
They're
problems off.
awful marketing.
Right, exactly. Like the developers in that arrangement were like, oh, amazing, we're going to have the marketing prowess of one of the largest publishers, most successful publishers of Japan, helping us out. And apparently there was a lot of miscommunication about what a game was actually about and how to market it in non-Japanese markets, and how that was supposed to work and how to best do it. And like it led to all sorts of uncomfortable conversations, apparently, between parent company and developers and sub company.
Yeah.
And now they're being sold to Embracer Group. Like, so Square Enix was saying like we're offloading at like bargain bin prices these development studios, which is crazy. But yeah, again, that's a thing that could happen in these circumstances. It would be crazy to see that happen with Ubisoft, but I also, again, do not see that happening with Tencent based on their past purchase experience.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move to the last topic of the day. Do you want to cover the details of this?
Yep. So I think we spoke about this last week, but Unity put in to buy an offer to buy out or merge with IronSource. Might have been 2 weeks ago we talked about this,
Mm-hmm.
but IronSource is sort of an advertising platform. You know, they enable certain types of advertisement. They also enable user tracking and user
I think it's fair to say that they're a
analytics.
user tracking company that it manages to use advertising on it because it's the user tracking that makes the advertising valuable.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of it's analytics and trying to figure out what keeps player like the Unity use case here is I am a game developer. I'm going to use Unity's new IronSource service to look in their dashboard or their backend for my game development experience. Once the game is launched, I can see how far players are making it, how much are they engaging, if they buy certain in-game app, in-app purchases, how are they using them, where are they using them, when are they buying, like all of this extra data to be able to see how the gameplay affects the monetization of the game and how so there's all this very technical stuff about trying to turn your app or game into a business and giving you insights to be able to create a data-driven choice or decision about how to enhance or improve your game's ability to get money out of the player.
Right.
Effectively, that's the goal, right? If you're making a game for money, you want to get money out of the player. This was a big thing, and it was really upsetting to many people because of some of IronSource's background. They had in previous products they built, they were not super, like they were basically a vehicle for malware at some point, and that caused them to be caught by antivirus software and whatever. So it became a thing, and it sort of tainted their name for a bit. They claimed to not be offering that product anymore. That enabled that other service or company to distribute malware on that system. Unity's whole thing here is, look, we want to merge with this company so that we can enhance our offering to game developers to make it so that we're not just providing the story for you as a developer for how to start from scratch to build your game to release, but also to manage the lifetime of your game post-release so that you can have the whole game life story with Unity. That's sort of their proposition here. And AppLovin is a competitor to IronSource. And AppLovin saw this deal go through, basically get announced, and said, right, well, either they're trying to poison the deal, or they're actually had been thinking about the deal themselves, some similar deal themselves, and said, man, we could always merge with Unity or whatever. And they came out 2 days ago or something like that with an offer to Unity to buy Unity for something like, what was it, $58 billion?
Oh, no, they're looking at doing an all-stock buy of 17.5 billion.
Right. But an all-stock buy would be a purchase, right? Like effectively purchase the company, and then the resulting company, Unity's portion would still, unless it's just like they're going to buy $58 billion worth of stock, and the resulting company of a merge between the two of them or something. It's sort of the deal.
I mean, the deal is that they would. I believe the deal is that they're not purchasing Unity outright. It's a publicly traded company. They can't unless they buy all the remaining stock of the company, and that includes other controlling stock shares. What I think they're doing is they're buying a controlling share in the company, and I think it would be buying out Unity's own controlling share in the company itself.
Yeah, right. To buy its pure Unity software in a $17.54 billion all-stock deal. So they're trying to buy Unity, and I think you're right. They're trying to buy out Unity's shares. And I think they said that they would have the resulting company, they would leave Unity and Unity's staff or whatever with 49% voting rights for the resulting company.
Yeah. What's interesting about this, though, is that so it was like, well, what's the motivation behind it? And it almost certainly they're trying to poison the IronSource deal.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, or throw kinks into it, make people second
Well,
guess.
one of the conditions for this was originally what was going to happen is if they merge with IronSource, I think IronSource's CEO was going to control the company. He was going to become the CEO of the now conglomerated IronSource uh, Unity company.
No, it was going to remain because it was Unity buying out IronSource.
No, it was technically a merger, but not really a merger. Uh, the the
But the name, I think the name of the resulting company was going to remain Unity.
correct.
IronSource was effectively
Yes.
going to be absorbed.
Yeah, because it's like Unity was buying them out, but part of the merger aspect of it was that some of the management group was going to be carried over into Unity, and I think we covered that in one of the older Sonic Boom Lives, which I think was last week. Was it last week? No, no, it was the week before. Let's see here.
Yeah, so John Riccatello made a statement that said that we look forward to welcoming Tomer Barziv,
Yeah.
the CEO of IronSource, and the rest of IronSource's talented team into the Unity family. So you're right, it's merging, but everything would remain Unity driven in the end.
Yeah. Oh, man, I can't even find where that Sonic Boom Live draft was.
What are the history of the notes that we had in there?
Yeah, but anyways,
I
like
should while you're doing that, I did want to mention my $58 billion was way off. There was 17.54 billion, and the 58 number was effectively the share price that they would be buying for.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. But I think it was to poison it. One was John Riccatello, who's the CEO of it's John Riccatello, right? I know his last name's Riccatello.
Riccatello.
Would stay as CEO. He'd become the CEO of AppLovin as well in the merged company.
Yeah.
And but part of the deal is they'd have to end the Iron Source deal. IronSource would go back to being an independent company, and now AppLovin, which is his competitor, would now be a combined company with Unity.
Right. Yep. So instead of Unity paying 4.4 billion to IronSource to merge with them, this is AppLovin saying we're going to pay you 17 billion plus to effectively buy you and merge you into us.
Yeah.
Like,
now they're not buying at a particularly great premium, but
right.
I don't know if that means the deal's likely to go through, but it's certainly to try to sweep the legs out from under the IronSource deal.
Yeah.
So anti-competitive behaviors, but
yeah. Well,
that's nothing.
I mean, it's a very competitive bid, right? Like,
that it is.
Yeah, they're trying to compete with IronSource and just nudge them out entirely.
Yeah,
it's a very aggressive move.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know what will happen of it. I mean, and we know people at Unity quite well, so
yeah,
it's like these things usually have impact on the teams. You don't make a big purchase and then suddenly have gobs of money to throw at problems. It usually means there's some sort of near-term downsizing that will happen as a result to try to recoup costs and losses from both companies in the near term. So it can't be great, but I can't say that this type of merge in which the original purpose of buying IronSource is trying to have Unity become a more robust publishing platform. That doesn't seem like it's the worst thing for the type of business they're in the first place, but
yeah, it's right. It's sort of a weird place to be in, where the AppLovin is coming in and saying, wait, don't buy them, we'll buy you instead. Consider us to buying you instead for way more money, with the only exception being that, like, our shareholders will and our business unit will maintain more voting rights than you, or have majority, assuming that they own 51%. It could be that the way that the stock splits are is that with 49% of the company, they would have majority share,
Right.
or be the lead, the board member or voting member with the
Right.
largest number of shares, and
Right, which is
therefore,
not uncommon. It's pretty common for like a
right,
20% share in a large company to have the
majority.
controlling majority share. Yeah.
Controlling. I think that's the word I was looking for, was controlling share. So all of the documentation that we've seen so far, the blurbs are saying 49% share. Does that mean that it's 49% Unity, 51% AppLovin? What does that look like? A lot of the mechanics of the deal have not been announced. It's mostly been just some of the high level deal details. One interesting factoid that came out of this is that at the end of the day that this deal was announced, this offer, all three of the companies, or today or something like that, closed down.
Yeah.
Down 10% for 10 or 11% for IronSource and AppLovin, and Unity was down 2.5% or something. Now I don't know what the rest of the market did. So
Yeah,
there
that's
could
what
be
I'm
a
kind
lot
of
of
curious. There was a
speculation
rally
there.
yesterday, so I
Right.
wonder if there was kind of like a rubber band effect from yesterday, where like all the markets
Market
did
reset
well,
a
and
bit.
today the markets contracted back. Yeah, there's some string contraction across the market.
Yeah. So it's hard to say what exactly happened, but
Dow Jones Industrials up, not that surprising given it's an industrial index.
right.
Nasdaq, S&P. There's a contraction, just not significant. The worst performance was from Nasdaq, which was like about half a
Yeah,
percentage.
yeah. But I mean, these are companies that went down 10.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So
you know, all right. Yeah, so it's a weird space. This means, I mean, Unity's board has to look it over. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's sort of a very weird space. What do you think? This does this say anything in particular about the game industry, or?
I mean, yeah, I think it's what we've been talking about this whole time, which is like there is a massive consolidation happening
Sure,
as we speak.
sure.
We've been watching it happen over the past 3 years. I think there's like two major trends that you could point to as indications as to why this sort of thing's happening. One is within the indie space, in the indie space getting more mature, getting more
Hmm.
expensive to produce games in, and there's a consolidation there where we're now seeing like indie publishers hold up the space where you see something like Annapurna or what's they're called? Blanking on the name. They're the ones that have the super weird stage shows. They're
Oh, Devolver Digital.
Devolver.
Yeah,
Basically, they don't directly fund the development of a game.
right.
They come in as publisher. They see someone who's making a really interesting game. I mean, they will actually directly fund development, but generally speaking, the wider um, you know games that they're publishing are being developed outside of it, and then they come to the developers of those games that they're publishing, and strike some sort of deal where like, okay, we're going to do your entire marketing budget, we're going to give you this budget to complete the rest of the game, etc. So
They might also help with things like ports.
yes, right. And this is how these companies have been stepping in and helping out the indie space. But the indie space that was there like 10 years ago when the Apple app marketplace
Hmm.
opened up, and like the PlayStation 4 opened up for digital publishing, and that was a big deal. It's changed a lot. It does wield quite a lot of money in the indie space. That's why there's large publishers that are very successful and making lots of money there. And the AAA space has consolidated as the cost of gaming has gone up. Um, and now that we're seeing like a push towards the metaverse, where we're likely seeing the end of app marketplaces in the mobile space and in the web space make a full-on transition over to the metaverse. I think that's what we're seeing as like a lot of the reason why we're seeing this sort of consolidation, why they're seeing Unity moving into app publishing more than just an app, a game development engine.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't know what it says exactly about the game industry, but I think the words that I've said before, which is consolidation is not always a good thing. When you have less companies controlling more percentage of the industry, it means more destabilization and less control or less buying rights or less consumer rights and choice as a consumer.
Sure. It may also eventually lead to more companies starting up again, another wave of new companies.
With the invention of the metaverse, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Support that, or a shift from a certain tier of development to another tier, like the content producers for a multiverse platform or set of multiverse platforms, whatever.
Yeah.
Mixed media craziness, whatever that ends up being.
Who knows? You have any other thoughts on this?
Not really. I mean, I think to me, it was just sort of sort of insider baseball, kind of a thing, or maybe that's not the right analogy, but it was sort of like, it seemed almost like a bit of a bullish move by AppLovin, or a cocky move to come in and be like, "Now, what about us? How about this deal?"
Right.
Like, we're going to try to screw this up for IronSource and maybe get some good stuff out of it for us. I actually don't know what the sentiment is and what the product portfolio differences are between IronSource and AppLovin. So it's hard to say, like, does AppLovin fit the same solution space that Unity was looking to fill with IronSource? Presumably,
I think
yes.
AppLovin is more of a direct publishing platform than IronSource was, but I think it's the the fundamentals of their business are the same, which is like get a bunch of user data, use that user data to determine information about your app, use that same information to pull together profiles on the users of these games to serve them ads that are more relevant to them and have a higher click-through rate, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Don't know. At the end of the day, this probably, at least in the short term, will most likely really affect, if it affects anybody, mobile game developers and mobile game players.
Yes.
Yeah.
As the current space where a lot of these things are published at. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else before we sign off?
I think that's about it for this week. Unless there's any last minute things that you wanted to toss out.
Nope. Just a reminder that
Next
if
week.
you like Choreographer, Choreographer Pro is on sale in the Unity Asset Store. Next week we will not be broadcasting due to business travel. And last but not least, if you do enjoy this content, you should follow us. Click that like button. I'm not even going to try to do like the smash the like and subscribe, but I think you have to say this. I think there's a way.
There's like an algorithm
that looks like scans your and just be like, nope, they're not promoting the things that we
not
care
gonna
about.
Promote it.
So we're
right.
not. Yeah, there's going to be less promotion. So yeah, I mean, if you do like if you do like what we do and you want to see more of these videos, if you do actually subscribe to us, you'll at least find out and you'll have it appear in your feed that we've produced another video for you to watch. So there's that. Some give and take, I guess. I guess that's it for today.
Sweet.
All right.
Sounds
thanks,
good.
everybody.
All right. Thank you.
See you 2 weeks from now.